Please.
Good morning, everyone. We're ready to resume the trial of the case. Please, in the courtroom. Any issues for the state?
Just one, Judge, just preliminarily, in regard to the motion to compel we had, the defense did comply with that. They filed a notice of compelled disclosure of confidential work product, is how they termed it. As I'd spoken to, at the last hearing, out of an abundance of caution, I actually had those 6 pages reviewed by an independent person, a member of the DA's office here in Brunswick, and Liberty Stewart, and it appeared that there were 3 pages in there that did not have anything to do with the statement of the defendant to the expert in that case. So I don't know what was in it. I had her actually put it in an envelope, seal it, put her initials on it, and so I will show defense counsel what I retained, just so they can see, and I will tender this to the court, so it's in the record as to what we did not review. That's what we actually did.
Rather than take time now, if you can make a report back on that at the break, that would be good. Is there anything for the defense?
We had a motion yesterday, Judge, and we were elected to request that a written order be done on our motion. So we would ask for that.
All right, I'll ask a proposed order from the state and let the defense review it, and then I'll take a look at it. I'll tell you what, I do have a staff attorney here. We'll do the order. Y'all busy. It's just I keep forgetting I do have help. And I'm glad to have help. All right, are we ready for the defense to present their opening statement?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's bring the jury in, please.
Let's all rise for the jury, please. Please be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good morning. It's good to see all of you. And thank you for being prompt and on time. That is very valuable, and I appreciate it very, very much. Yesterday, when we concluded for the day, the state had presented their opening statements. Now it's time for the defendant to proceed and make their opening statements, please. Thank you, Mr. Toddler.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First thing I want to tell you is that the state is right about one very important matter, and that is Ross Harris is responsible for his child's death. Ross is responsible. It's his fault. There's no doubt about it. From the moment he drove down the road, looked back over his shoulder, and caught a glimpse of Cooper in the back, he knew what he had done. He knew he'd forgotten him. And he whipped his car over into a parking lot and pulled him out, desperately looking at that little boy. And you're going to hear that he tried to do CPR. What you're going to hear is that he was too overwhelmed, and he couldn't concentrate. But he never blamed anybody but himself. What kind of words did he use at the scene? My God, what have I done? I killed my boy. I'm so sorry, Cooper. I'm so sorry. It's the biggest mistake of my life. This is my fault. What have I done? I've killed my son. I can't believe I did this. Ross has always acknowledged that this was his fault, that he was responsible. But what you're going to see during this trial is that responsible isn't the same thing as criminal. And the evidence is going to show you during this trial that Ross loved that little boy more than anything. Cooper's death was an accident. It was always an accident. And that's exactly what he told the police when they interviewed him. And he told them over and over and over again. This was an accident. I didn't mean to do this. This wasn't intentional. What was he supposed to say? But because he's saying, listen, this is an accident, they say, well, he's setting up his defense. Telling the truth that it was an accident and setting up your defense. And what he did wasn't willful. Meaning, he wasn't doing some sort of reckless act that would inevitably lead him to believe, hey, Cooper's going to be injured by what I'm doing, like maybe driving around drunk with his son in the car, or maybe leaving his son in the car while he ran in someplace real quick just to maybe shop for a few minutes and forget about him then. Didn't do anything like that. Nothing with knowledge, nothing willful, reckless. You're going to hear a lot of really bad things about Ross Harris. You're going to hear about his sexually immoral behavior. And he's earned every bit of the shame that's coming his way on that regard. You're going to hear that Ross used social media apps to exchange very gross and graphic, filthy sexual talk with people. You're going to hear about all kind of nasty internet chats. You're not going to hear he ever molested a child. You're not going to hear he ever had sex with anybody underage. You're certainly not going to hear that he ever forced anybody to do anything they didn't want to do. You're going to hear about infidelity. You're going to hear about adultery. And that is, Ross was unfaithful to his wife, and you're going to hear about that. Sexual liaison, sometimes in cars. You're going to hear about very embarrassing, graphic sexual matters and vulgar language. And he's earned every bit of that shame. But Ross's sex life, no matter how perverse and nasty and wrong that we think it is, it doesn't have a thing in the world to do with the fact that he forgot that little boy. Nothing. They're completely unrelated, got nothing to do with each other. The fact that he lived a life with some filthy sexual behavior isn't some kind of motive to murder the person he loved more than anyone in the world. What it is it's evidence of his filthy sex life. That's all it is. You're going to hear that throughout the day that Cooper died, it was really kind of like any other day. Ross is sending out, texting, sexual communications, nasty language on his phone. Like he had no reason in the world, no reason to think that somebody might, just might, be looking on his phone. But his sexting throughout the day, and this is important, and I want you to keep your eye on during the trial, his sexting throughout the day was after he had forgotten Cooper. It was all after he'd forgotten him. And that's going to be very crucial during the course of this trial, and I want you to really pay attention to that. So, no matter how disgusted and angry we are with what he was doing while his son was out in the car, it is not going to change the fact that Ross didn't know. See, we're angry about that, and we are disgusted by that because we know something that he didn't know. As he sat in his office on his phone, like every other day, texting away, saying, God knows what, we know something he didn't know. And that's why we're so angry about it. That's why we're so disgusted about it. But it doesn't change the fact that at the time he was doing it, he was clueless. Mr. Boring kept saying yesterday that Ross was living a double life. And you're going to find out that Ross's closest friends knew that he was dealing with sexual sins in his life, and pornography, things like that. And it actually reached out and asked for help, asked for an accountability partner. You're going to find out that over the years, Ross's wife had seen things on his phone. And they'd been in marriage counseling. You're going to find out that Ross confessed to the men in his Sunday school class, this small group at church, that he was dealing with sexual sins. And he asked for prayer. Was Ross struggling with sexual sins in his life? You betcha. Big time. But just because you don't go around telling everybody about your sins and about your private sexual business, it doesn't mean you're living a double life. I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the evidence in the case, particularly the investigation. What you're going to see is that Ross, at the scene, when he pulled Cooper out, he was hysterical. But we expect that you're going to hear lots of state's witnesses come in and suggest he didn't act right. He didn't cry enough. You know, he didn't act like someone who just lost a child. Whatever that is. He didn't act like someone who's in the back of a car looking over his shoulder at a macabre scene of his dead child being attended to by strangers. He didn't act like we expect. He didn't act like somebody whose world was just snatched from him and then he was put in handcuffs and in custody. How do we know how anybody's going to act under those circumstances? But the evidence is that none of these people who want to stand up, none of these police officers who want to stand up and say, he was acting funny, he was acting suspicious, none of them knew Ross. None of them. None of them knew his eccentricities. None of them knew his personality. None of them knew his coping mechanism for trauma. tragedy. I just want to say he didn't act like I would act if it was me. But you're going to hear that he was in fact a very pitiful, broken man, particularly when police weren't around. The state spent a lot of time yesterday emphasizing that Ross is guilty because he just didn't act like somebody who lost a job. But you're going to see and hear about the reactions of somebody else, Ross's wife at the time, Leanna Harris. And you're going to find out that that woman was devastated by the loss of her little boy. And you're going to see, you're actually going to see and hear that she was so broken that she couldn't cry. You can hear that upon finding out about the death of her son, she was in shock. You can hear her on the phone with her mother saying, "I don't know why I can't cry." I don't know why I can't cry. And you're going to see that when Ross was with her, and he was bawling out of his mind, that she was very strong and calm and poised and comforted him. And so the police, they found her behavior very curious, very suspicious. Why? Because she wasn't acting like somebody's supposed to act when they've lost a child. People jumped to the conclusion that she was involved somehow, some sort of conspiracy. She wasn't acting right. But you're going to find out that they were wrong. Jumped into that conclusion that were very, very wrong. Ross left work early that afternoon to meet his friends at the movie. And he had to drive through a very busy intersection at Highway 41 and Acres Mill Road. This is Highway 41. You can see it's some 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or so lanes. And this is Acres Mill Road. Can you see? Not exactly the same sort of setup as driving from here to Glen Academy. Okay, it's quite massive and busy. And so Ross is coming from this direction, and he has to drive through here, and he's going to the movie theater, which is actually back over behind this building. And so what you're going to see is when he comes through this intersection, he's traveling in the left-hand lane, and he's got to get over to the outside lane here, so that when he gets here, he can turn. So he crosses the intersection, and he's driving down on the inside lane, and to get over, he looks over his shoulder. He looks completely over his shoulder to change lanes in this area. And that's when he sees the crown of Cooper's head. That's the first time, the only time that he saw him. And he knew right then his child was dead. He knew right then. And you're gonna see and you're gonna hear that what he did was he got over and he whipped in to this road right here. This is not the road. This is the restaurant Uncle Mario's, and this is the restaurant Cinco. This is not where he was supposed to turn. He was going down further to a movie theater. He whipped in here and locked it up right at the mouth of the back of this shopping center. and you're going to see that he was hysterical. And you're going to hear that he got Cooper out and he tried to do CPR. He tried to do it, but he couldn't focus. What have I done? You're going to hear he was screaming. And you're going to hear and you're going to see that he's desperately trying to get somebody on the phone. You're going to see it. He's trying to get somebody on the phone. And he's described by bystanders and the police as hysterical. Over and over and over. I can't believe I did this. I can't believe I did this. Let me show you what you're going to see.
Keep everyone back for it. Get back. I'm with you. You work security. I need you to move everybody out, okay? Everybody back.
Raw. Ross was so out of it, he couldn't even follow the simple instructions of the police. Actually yelling, "F you, my son just died." After he was arrested on the scene, you're not going to hear that he put on some sort of show in front of the police. There's no falling out and acting out like some sort of performance. In fact, it's quite the opposite. You can see that he was cooperative, and he made nervous small talk. He was respectful. As far as the state's concerned, I think what you heard yesterday is if he's not crying or not crying enough, that's suspicious. But when he cries and cries out and shows some emotion, well, it's an act. It doesn't matter what he does. Either way, the state's position is it's not right. It's not the right reaction. It's suspicious. It's all wrong. Ross was driven from that scene to the police headquarters. He was put in an interview room by himself. And you're going to hear, Mr. Moore mentioned yesterday that on that ride from the scene that you just saw to police headquarters, that you need some water. Okay? That on that ride, that Ross chatted with the police officer. But you're actually going to hear her say, "Sir, I understand you have the need to talk." Alone, in the back of that car, just realizing that you're responsible for your child's death, knowing that time's coming, you're going to have to face your wife about what you've done. You're going to hear that the lead detective, and this is the lead detective right over here with the blue tie in the front row. That's Detective Phil Stoddard. You're going to hear that he's previously testified under oath that when Ross was put into the interview room by himself, he said there were no tears, no real emotion out of him. No tears, no real emotion out of him. And you're going to see and hear that that testimony was not true. The evidence is that when they put Ross in the interview room and he's in there alone, with the death of his little boy, he wept bitterly outside the view of police officers. He wept bitterly and cried out to God, cried out in disbelief of what he had done. Let me show you what he did when they put him in that room.
Oh my God! Why did I do that? Oh, I think I'm
No tears. No real emotion coming out of it. That's what the police, that's how they summarized what you just saw. Later during the interview, in this interview, it was voluntary. He waived his rights and he said, I'll talk to you. I don't have anything to hide. But you're going to hear during this interview that he was very respectful of the detectives. And he composed himself enough to talk. And he cooperated. And you're going to hear that this is just hours after he's found his son dead. That he's trying to answer their questions. And he's not carrying on. He's not acting out. He's not falling all over the place in front of them like some sort of show. He's trying to answer their questions. And you're going to see and hear this interview, and you're going to hear that he spoke in a very monotone, kind of defeated voice. And he explained to him that he just couldn't think straight. I want you to listen to that interview as he tells him, please forgive me. I just don't know what to do, man. But please forgive me. I'm trying to get my shit together. I'm tired right now, man. Guys, I got to be honest. I don't know what to do right now. I really don't. I'm in absolute loss for everything. I don't know. Listen, if there was a time to act and perform and put on some sort of show for the police, that was the time to do it. Nothing like that. Nothing like that in front of them. You're going to see somebody that's desperately just trying to answer questions under the most stressful situation imaginable. After Ross gave his interview with the police, they put him in a room alone with his wife and recorded her trying to comfort him. And you're going to hear that Detective Stoddard over there previously testified under oath that when allowed to speak with his wife in private, this is what he testified to. It was all about him. I can't believe this is happening to me. I can't believe, this happened to me. Why am I being punished for this? And it continued. It was very one-sided. And you're going to get to see and hear for yourself that is absolutely not true. That it's false. What you're going to see is that when he got in that room with his wife and he was out of eyeshot of the police, he broke down and wept inconsolably, crying out for his son, crying out for God to help him. Let me show you what you're going to see, just a little bit of it.
I know you didn't. I don't know. I know you didn't. I know you didn't. I know you didn't. Honey, I know.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I loved him so much. I loved him so much. I'm so sorry your son's gone. I know that he's in heaven right now, my boy. I can't believe I did this. I'm never going to see my boy again. Are you going to make it? I'm worried about you. I'm so sorry. It hurts so bad. God, please forgive me. Please help me. Please help my wife. Please help me. Please let me trade places with Cooper. They know I love that little boy. It hurts so bad. It hurts to my core. It's my fault. It's me. There's not anybody in the world. Somebody took him and left him. Nobody that you think. It's all me. I'm just going to miss him. I'm going to miss him so much. Oh God, what have I done? What have I done? He was so beautiful. You know, that man sitting over there, he may have been an adulterer, but he was devastated by the loss of his son. You can hear that Cobb County police officers swore under oath to a judge over and over and over that Ross was researching how long it takes a child to die in a car. This is what's in the warrant. Warrants. During an interview with Justin, he stated that he had recently researched through the internet child deaths inside vehicles and what temperature it needs to be for that to occur. And the same detective then gave oral testimony to a magistrate. He also made statements regarding that he had researched how long it takes someone to die inside a vehicle, what the temperature it needs to be. Those sworn statements and testimony are false. They are false. Ross Harris never said those things. He never told police that he had recently researched through the internet child deaths inside vehicles and what temperature it needs to be for that to occur. He never told police that he recently researched through the internet, recently researched how long it takes someone to die inside a vehicle, what temperature it needs to be. He never told police that. And more importantly, he never did it. He never did it. And the police knew it. They knew he didn't do it. But they swore under oath over and over and over that he did. During his interview with police, Ross is trying to explain to detectives, he's trying to explain, I can't believe that I did this. I can't believe this happened. Why? Because I know about the dangers of leaving a child in a car. I've seen a public service announcement about leaving pets in a car. And everybody's seen these PSAs. And Ross tells the police that he saw it on the internet, where a vet warns of the danger of leaving the pets in a car because of the heat. And how does he see this PSA? How does he see it? Police know. Does he Google, how long does it take a dog to die in a car? No. No. It's a link on his Reddit page. It was a trending video, which means it was a very popular video. And he clicked the link, which took him to YouTube in order to play it, to play this public service announcement. If the state brings a computer expert in here, which I believe they will, he is going to tell you there was no such search. He did not search anything about how long it takes a dog to die in a car. Ross is telling the police, guys, I'm aware of this stuff. That's not setting up a defense. You're going to hear he's just telling them, I know about this stuff. I can't believe I've done this. He tells them he saw a news report on TV about a guy who left a child in a car. He saw a news report. He explains to the police, I've seen this stuff. I know better. And the state says, that's setting up a defense. He's already trying to set up a defense that he's going to be an advocate or something. What in the world is he supposed to tell them? He's seen the stuff. He's telling them, I know about this. You're going to hear that Ross researched everything. Everything. He did search after search after search after search. He Googled everything. He was an absolute information-aholic. He searched all kinds of stuff. A lot of it sexual. A lot of it really filthy. A lot of sports, music, guitars, things like that. But he never searched. He never Googled. He never typed in child death, hot car, how hot does it get in a parked car, animal death, how long does it take a child to die in a car. He never searched those things. And the evidence is that these sworn statements by police that he searched for child deaths in hot cars, it was something that was made up by the Cobb County Police Department. That's the evidence that you're going to hear. Because the objective evidence is that this was an accident. One thing I want to mention from yesterday, Mr. Bourne said that Ross was deceptive because when asked for the code to his phone, that Ross said it was biometric. It's biometric. You can see that Ross's phone was an iPhone. And it's definitely biometric. That is, has the touch ID. Where basically, to turn it on, you put your finger there and it comes on. Right? Well, if it's your phone and that's how you turn it on all the time with your finger, you're not putting your code in. You're not putting your code in. And what you're really going to see is that Ross just forgot his code. He wasn't lying that it was biometric. It was biometric. He just forgot his code because he never punches it in. But you're going to see that later on in the interview, he remembers what the code is and he tells them. He gives them the information. And so this suggestion that this is somehow, some way he was trying to mislead the police, I want you to remember that. I want you to remember. That's a suggestion they're trying to sell you on. I want to tell you about something you didn't hear about anything yesterday, and that is that detective testified that Ross had searched the internet for topics pertinent to motive, and he testified that Ross went to a subreddit. You can hear a lot about Reddit during this trial. That was called Child Free. And child free is people who advocate living child free. They advocate not having any more children and adding to the biomass. Police believe that this was his motive. That's what you're going to hear. But this was evidence of motive. But as it turns out, Ross never followed or joined any such group. He never espoused a child-free philosophy anywhere, anytime to anybody. He never messaged anyone about a child-free, living child-free. He never clicked on a single post espousing a philosophy of living child-free. When we talked to Detective Stoddard, you're going to hear that in his report, he put that Ross had accessed child-free pages that advocate living a child-free life. That he accessed child-free pages that advocate living a child-free life. Well, you're going to see in here that that's false. It's false. None of the pages that Ross visited over about a couple of 3 or 4 minutes advocated living a child-free life. Not one. The truth is that this was months before Cooper died, and he clicked 3 posts that had nothing to do with wanting to live without children. One was a post about a blind man who was having trouble getting a date. One was a post about a woman who had posted a photo of her IUD on Facebook. And one was a post about a woman who had a family member get out of prison and was wanting her to have a baby for her. You can hear he never went back to those pages. He never commented on them. And so the evidence that police believe this child-free clicking on Reddit was some kind of a motive, you're going to see that that suggestion is absolutely false and misleading, which is probably why we didn't hear about it yesterday. We did hear about the fact there was a stench of death in the car. I believe those were Mr. Boring's words, stench of death in the car. And Detective Stoddard over here testified previously under oath that Ross's car smelled like death. Of course, the suggestion is that he gets in the car at the end of the day, and there's this overpowering odor of death that, you know, anybody would have just jumped out of the car and went, "Oh my God, what is that?" That's the suggestion. He had to have known that Cooper was in there. If we've got this overpowering stench of death. But the evidence that you're going to hear is that all the first responders to the scene, nobody reported any such odor. The bystanders that were on the scene, and what you're going to see, and let me warn you, these pictures are very macabre. They're very macabre of a dead little boy. But what you're going to see is that Cooper was 36 inches from the door frame. Literally right outside the door frame of the car. Right there. And the car door is open. Okay? And the bystanders on the scene, nobody reported such an odor. The EMS personnel who were down there right on Cooper's body, no reported odor. The firemen that were there, no reported odor. And even the investigator for the medical examiner, who is the eyes and ears and hands and nose of the medical examiner, he didn't report any such odor. Only the lead detective in the case and his boss. Only the lead detective in the case and his boss reported smelling an odor hours later, after all the first responders had reported smelling nothing. Now, there was a CSI detective that had been all up over the car, taking pictures and taking measurements. You're going to hear about this CSI detective whose name is Grimstead. He did a very, very, very detailed report with all kind of measurements of exactly everything he did. And he made no mention of a stench of death. This is the guy who's doing the measurements. No mention of a stench of death. But very curiously, about a year later, Grimstead, who's on Detective Stoddard's team, about a year later, he spontaneously remembered, "Oh yeah, I smelled death." But the evidence that you're going to have in this case is that there was no odor of decomposition or decay. There was no such odor. In fact, you're going to see in here scientific evidence to that fact. There was an autopsy done 16 hours after Cooper was found. And there's slides of bodily tissue that's preserved from the autopsy. And you're gonna hear that those slides were examined. And what they found was there was completely insufficient decomposition to create the smell of death that Detective Stoddard claimed that he smelled. Scientific proof that if he smelled death, it wasn't Cooper Harris. Or maybe he smelled what he wanted to smell because it fit the state's theory. Mr. Bourne spent a lot of time yesterday talking about the Whisper. And that's the app where you can anonymously post random thoughts. Ross posted a lot of stuff that was sexual in nature. But what you're going to find is that Ross followed Whisper like a lot of people follow Facebook. He was on it all the time. And of course, you saw this red image. You saw this red image, and the state wanted to keep that up all day yesterday, and you're going to hear that the detectives thought that Ross had typed that, but they were wrong. Ross didn't type this. He commented on it. But he commented on lots of things that morning. So on the morning of June the 18th, the day that he's supposedly in the middle of carrying out a murder, okay, he's posting a bunch of filth on his phone through Whisper. And as he's scrolling through Whisper, he's commenting on all kinds of stuff that morning. So this comes up on his feed. I wonder what coffee enema would do to somebody, ha, ha, ha. And his comment was, there are actually people who do this, like 3 or 4 times a day. It's crazy to me, but they love it. 7:40 in the morning. Bought a MacBook Air yesterday, love it. 8:16 in the morning, Ross is still at home. Yeah, I love my Mac. Next. Teachers assign you homework and never check it out. Why the F did you give it? Ross's comment at 8:43, he's probably on his way to work here, on his way to Chick-fil-A. Because you won't practice the work if none is given to you. 8:46 in the morning, this one comes on his feed. Having an extremely boring and slow day. Can anyone help the time go by faster? His comment, my day just started too. I woke up at 5:30. Kill me. Well, I have a son. That joker decided that, hey, I'm going to get up early. He's awesome. 8:48 in the morning. This comes across his phone. Anyone like a tall girl? I do, but I'm not very single. Y'all girls are sexy. 2 weeks until I go to PCB, 8:49 in the morning. Ross says, I love PCB bikinis. Well, I love them. Police just want to focus on this one, just this one, where the conclusion is it's nefarious. But he's going to put on his phone right as he's about to carry out a murder plan. He's going to put it on his phone. There's something nefarious about him responding that man wanting to hang out with his friends. Is that really unique? Fact of the matter is, what he conveyed was that he loved his son. There's nothing nefarious about it. It was one of the many random as heck things that he responded to that morning. You're going to hear, you heard some yesterday about Ross stopping at the Home Depot store. But you're going to hear that Detective Stoddard testified previously that it was impossible that Ross forgot that he stopped at the Home Depot. It was impossible that Ross forgot. And so what the evidence is going to be that Ross had two friends, Alex and Winston, and they came and picked him up for lunch. They went to the Publix, got a sandwich, and then afterwards they went to a Home Depot store that was across from the Publix. And Ross bought some light bulbs. They brought him back to the tree house and they dropped him off at his car. And he put the light bulbs in the car. And when Ross was interviewed that day by Detective Stoddard, Ross explained exactly what he had done all day. He told him that he went to Chick-fil-A for breakfast, told him where he went to lunch, who he went to lunch with. But he forgot about going to Home Depot. But you're going to hear that there were 3 people that went to Home Depot. Ross, Alex, and Winston. 3 people who went in there to get light bulbs, and 3 people who stopped at Ross's car. Now, Ross had just lost a child. He was under arrest. He hadn't even faced his wife yet. And he gave an account of the whole day. His friend Winston was interviewed the following day. He's not under arrest. He had just lost a child. He's not exactly under the same kind of stress that Ross was under. And he gave an account of a 45-minute lunch period. And he completely forgot about going to Home Depot after lunch. Just like Ross. And Winston was specifically questioned. Did you make any other stops? No. Well, did you go to the Home Depot store? Oh yeah, now that you mention it. He forgot, just like Ross. But the detective testified that it was impossible, it's not possible that Ross could have forgotten. But you're going to hear, he didn't tell the magistrate that one of the other guys forgot too. Mr. Boring didn't tell you that yesterday either. Ross never got inside of his car at lunch. We actually have surveillance video of exactly what happened when they dropped him off. He has his light bulbs. In the video you see he walks up to the car, he opens the door, light bulbs in, closes the door, turns around and walks away. The whole thing is less than 5 seconds. And you're going to get to see it. And you're going to hear that after reviewing this video, Detective Stoddard testified that he's all the way inside the frame. He's in there. He has a clear view. That's what this detective's testimony was. And you're going to be able to see for yourself in that video that that testimony is false. He was never all the way inside the frame. He was never in there. He never had a clear view. He never looked in the car. And you're going to get to see it. He never had the angle to look in the car. And curiously, you're going to hear that later, Detective Stoddard gave completely different testimony to another magistrate when we weren't in open court. He told him that his head was above the rim. So he goes from, he's all the way inside the frame, he's in there, he has a clear view, to later, his head was above the rim. Well, you're going to see for yourself that was true. His head's above the rim. And the actual video, I mean, it shows exactly what happened. He never stopped and peeped in. He never looked. He never even hesitated. Imagine if he's in the throes of this murder plot and there's a dead child in the car. Never even glances. Never even glances. No hesitation. We believe the state's going to show you sort of a cartoon video that suggests that even though there's surveillance that Ross had to have been able to see inside the car. But what you're also going to see and hear is evidence that 5 minutes after Ross got out of that car in the parking lot in the morning, 5 minutes, a lady walks right by the back window of Ross's car and right by the passenger window of Ross's car. And she did not see Cooper in there. Mr. Bourne did mention yesterday in this surveillance video that you see Ross walking away from the scene, and so there being a suggestion that somehow he stops or looks back or stops or does something suggesting that he's trying to wait to see if a guy walked past his car. You're going to see it. That's false. You're going to see the video. What you're going to see is very clear. He's walking back from his car, and he stops, looks on his phone, walks a little more, stops, looks on his phone. That's all it is. I want you to remember that, though. I want you to remember the suggestion out there that's what the state's going to try to sell to you. Somehow this is nefarious. Ross needed light bulbs, and the evidence is going to corroborate that he needs light bulbs. And why is that important? Well, the evidence is going to be that during the investigation, that police thought that Ross didn't need the light bulbs. They thought he had concocted this whole light bulb thing just to go back to the car. But they were wrong. During the lunch break, I've already told you that they went to Home Depot and purchased some bulbs. And police were so certain that this was some sort of concocted part of the plot that they went to a judge and they got a search warrant to specifically search for Ross's home to see if he really needed any light bulbs, to see if any light bulbs were out. And what did they find? Vanity bulbs. The very bulbs that he went to Home Depot to purchase. Police got it wrong. You're not going to hear, listen, they've torn his life apart in this investigation. Torn it apart. You're not going to hear that there's any history of abuse or neglect. None. No abuse, not even corporal punishment. No neglect, no indifference. No suggestion that Ross ever neglected Cooper. In fact, all the evidence you're going to hear and all the evidence you're going to see is that he was a very engaged dad. He was very involved in his son's life. They loved him. You're going to see and hear that he found time to spend with Cooper. Sometimes even going down to Little Aprons during the day just to spend time with him. Every eyewitness that you're going to hear from that actually knew Ross and Cooper is going to confirm that very fact, that he was a loving father who loved his son dearly. You're going to hear a lot of evidence, really, frankly, just overwhelming evidence that Ross was planning for a future with Cooper. You're going to hear about this fact they were planning for a cruise. You're going to hear all about this. And what you're going to hear and find is this. The state examined Ross's computers and his devices, and they found that on June the 9th, okay, 9 days before Cooper died, Ross's computer shows that he was searching for Carnival Cruise Line's kids. Carnival Cruise Line's kids policy. Do kids cruise free? Why is he searching that? I'm sure there's going to be some suggestion from the state. I don't even know what it might be. He's searching that because he's planning to take Cooper on a cruise. On June 17th, the day before Cooper dies, Ross emailed a travel agent inquiring about the family cruise. And this is what his email said. Heather, my family is looking to go on a cruise around mid-October. When I say family, I mean 9 people. That includes Leanna, Cooper, and I, as well as my brother and his wife and his 6 kids. Cooper's the only toddler, but I was hoping you could put a few things together to see what we're all looking at. Any ideas? No. This is the day before. He's planning for future events with his son. Hours later, in the early morning hours of June the 18th, 12:48 in the morning, Ross is up doing all kind of stuff, work, sexting, but he's doing one thing I want you to really take notice of. At 12:48 in the morning, he's Googling information about child passport costs. He's planning for a future with Cooper. He doesn't know if Cooper might need a passport for the cruise. And in the morning of June 18th, Ross gets an email from the travel agent about the cruises. Mr. Boyne told you yesterday, this is what he told you. He said, Ross didn't even respond to that email because he knew there would be no cruise with Cooper. But what he didn't tell you was that Ross didn't respond to the email. But at 9:45 in the morning, he started Googling, right after he gets this email, he starts Googling for more information on Carnival cruises. He's clueless. This is 15 to 20 minutes after he's gotten out of the car. He's clueless. He's Googling information about cruises. He's got no idea that little boy's in the car. None. He hasn't forgotten that he has a son. In his mind, the workday started, his son's at daycare. You're going to hear evidence that Ross was searching for a family house for Cooper, searching for a house with a big yard, good school district. He was asking co-workers and friends about neighborhoods. He had a real estate agent. You're going to see all kind of stuff that he was getting for family homes. Homes in very specific school districts, good school districts. Is that what some wild, childless bachelor wants? Is a 3 and 3 in a neighborhood in a good school district? Really? He's planning for a future with his son. There's no evidence that Ross was planning to end his marriage. At the guts of it, this is really what the state's theory is. He wants to get out of this marriage and he wants to get away from his family. But there is absolutely no evidence that he was making plans for such a thing. Of the thousands and thousands and thousands of searches that he did, there is not one search for divorce lawyer, alimony. Can I file a divorce without a lawyer? His whole plan is to get away from his wife, and he doesn't do a single search to carry out that plan. Nothing. Why is that? Well, Ross was an unfaithful husband. But like so many unfaithful husbands, he wanted to have his cake and eat it too. He didn't want to get away from his family. He loved his family. He wanted to keep them. He just didn't. He wanted to have his cake also. We heard yesterday about this young woman that Ross had an online relationship with, J.M. Now, she's an adult. Her name's Janie. And we heard that they expressed love, and they were best friends. And they were friends. And they did meet in person one time, almost a year earlier. But she's going to tell you, they didn't have any plans to be together. They weren't sexually involved. Now, they exchanged some naked photos, but they weren't in a sexual relationship about to run off. And she's going to tell you that Ross talked about Cooper all the time. She's going to tell you that Ross loved Cooper more than anything. and that Ross told her he would never leave Leanna because of Cooper. He loved him that much. There's no evidence that Ross did any research on stories about children forgotten in cars. His computers were, they were torn apart. And his phone. And it shows everything that he was Googling and researching. All kind of random stuff and sexual things and buying a house and air conditioners. And he's an information junkie. He's in that industry. He's a web developer. And you're going to hear that he's one of those guys. He's a junkie for information. He searches everything. But this guy who is planning a calculated, sinister murder, no searches on kids in cars, no searches on forgotten baby syndrome, no searches on hot car deaths, no searches for articles about families who have forgotten their child in a car, no videos or news reports on children forgotten in car, no search even remotely related to children dying in cars, no search about the law surrounding child deaths, no search for penalties for manslaughter or murder or cruelty, no search for criminal negligence, no search for the word intent or malicious intent, and no search for a criminal lawyer. The guy who searches for everything continuously through his life, all day, he does no searches for the biggest event of his life. I want to show you something about the parking lot. This is the parking lot at the tree house where Ross parked that day. And he would have come in right here off the road, drive around the back, and there's video of all this. And he drives right down here. He drives right down here, okay? And we heard yesterday he did a little back up to here and then pulled into this space here, okay? This is wintertime in this picture, but this is a shaded space. It's a prime shaded space. But what's most important is this. You're going to see that these spaces, there's space right here. This is a wood line. He could have backed that truck right up into this space. Backed it right up there, where his back window would have been facing the wood line. This is a rear-facing car seat. If he would have just backed that car up, it would have been guaranteed that nobody could have seen in that car. Instead, he's making no effort at all to hide the car. He's pulling it right here in a prime spot, right where people are pulling out, and right where you're going to see people do their laps during the day, where people walking right by the car. He can hide it in the wood line, and he doesn't do that. Why? Because he's got no idea that Cooper's in the car. You're going to see that June the 18th was really like any other day. Now, Ross had a bunch of filth on his phone, stuff about adultery and sexual communications, very graphic language. And he doesn't take any effort at all that day to get that information off his phone. None. In fact, while his murder plan is underway, what's he doing? Like any other day, he's adding a bunch of terribly incriminating, nasty, adulterous stuff to his phone. He's in the midst of this murder plan, and the phone that he's got, he's adding all this stuff to it. And he makes no effort to get rid of it or hide it. He makes no effort to disengage that whisper app. He's just adding stuff to his phone all day long, like he got no idea that somebody might even think about looking on his phone. I want to talk to you real briefly in the moments that I have left about sort of try to understand how this could have happened. And to understand it, you got to know about Ross's routine in the morning. You're going to hear that most mornings, not every morning, but most mornings, he was the one responsible for taking Cooper to daycare. And he'd drive from his home in Marietta south towards Smyrna. And he'd drop Cooper off at Little Aprons on his way in. But most mornings, after he dropped Cooper off, Ross would then go to the Chick-fil-A. And he'd get his breakfast, usually through the drive-thru. And he would drive straight through the light at Powers Ferry. This is the intersection. This is Chick-fil-A. He dropped Cooper off. He'd go to Chick-fil-A. And he'd drive straight through this intersection to work, right here. Straight through that intersection to work. That's what he normally did. And on days that Ross did not take Cooper to daycare, he also went to Chick-fil-A. And he left. And he drove straight through that intersection to work. Straight through that intersection to work. That was his typical morning routine. Sometimes he'd go to Chick-fil-A at lunch. And when he left lunch at Chick-fil-A, he dropped straight through that intersection back to work. Straight through that intersection back to work. Publix is right here. Sometimes he'd go to lunch at Publix. He'd leave Publix and drive straight through that intersection back to work. Straight through back to work. We went through that intersection a lot. A lot. Always with the same destination ahead, work. It was his habit. It was his pattern, and he did it all the time. But you're going to hear that occasionally that pattern would be changed, and they would have their daddy-son time together at Chick-fil-A. You know, that's the kind of thing that dads do who want to spend time with their children, is to take them to breakfast occasionally, because that's something a dad can do. That's not the kind of thing an unloving, uncaring dad would do. But you're going to hear that sometimes they would have their little daddy-son breakfast together. And on those days, Ross did not follow that pattern of driving from the Chick-fil-A straight back through that intersection to work. On those days, what Ross is supposed to do is to come out here, do the U-turn, and when he gets to this intersection, he's supposed to take a left to go back to the daycare on the breakfast days with Cooper. In most days, he doesn't have Cooper, so he's just going straight on. He's already dropped him off, so he's just going straight to work. But on the days he's got Cooper, he's got to take this left at that intersection. And this sort of change in his routine, it was sporadic. It wasn't every week. It wasn't even every month. Some months, not at all. And you're going to hear that Ross told police that it's something they did 2 or 3 times a month. Well, that was an exaggeration. It definitely was not 2 or 3 times a month. Ross is trying to convey to these police officers that, hey, I love spending time with my son, and he exaggerated. What you're going to hear is about a text message in March of 2014. Ross telling his wife that he and Cooper were going to breakfast because they hadn't done it in like 2 months. There's no evidence that Ross and Cooper had actually been to that Chick-fil-A for a couple of months. You're going to hear that the former manager of that Chick-fil-A knows Ross and knows about Ross because Ross is in that Chick-fil-A so much. but he never seen Cooper before. Because Ross is in that Chick-fil-A a lot. Through the drive-thru, a lot without Cooper. So when he drives out of that Chick-fil-A, and he goes straight through that intersection, that is his habit. That is his, it doesn't require any thought. It's his route, it's his routine. Well, what about leaving Chick-fil-A on June the 18th? What happened that day? I mean, that's the question that we've all got. What happened on that day, June the 18th? How could anyone forget? And so fast. Well, human memory is an amazing and miraculous thing. But it's not perfect, and sometimes it fails us. And this is not something that we understand, and it's not something that we can explain. But there are scientists who study memory failure and why and how parents can forget. And just very, very basically is what you're going to hear. There are different parts of our brain that deal with memory. And to make it real simple, we have short-term memory, and that is where we're concentrating on something at that moment. And that includes intentional or prospective memory, what we're intending to do, a plan for a future action. And that part of the brain, you have to maintain awareness of what it is you intend to do and the steps or details to execute those plans. That's what we're thinking about doing. That's what we intend to do. I intend to stop at the dry cleaner on the way home. I intend to, when I get to that road, I'm going to take a right and I'm going to go to the dry cleaner. That's the short-term perspective, intentional memory. And then another part of our brain deals with long-term memory or habit. That's the routine behavior that doesn't require that planning and concentration. It's because it's what we do over and over and over. It's kind of a way to give our brain a rest. It's our habit. We shower every morning, we brush our teeth, and we get ready, and we drive to work, and every day it's exactly the same, and we don't have to think about it. And if we think back over the last week, we can't remember what our brushing experience, teeth brushing experience was like on Tuesday versus Thursday. Because it's all habit. We don't think about it. It all runs together. Just like our drive in the morning to work. And you're going to hear that when habit memory kicks in, we can basically go into autopilot. This is like when you're on the road and you get 20 minutes down the road and you're like, wow, what happened to the last 20 minutes? We can lose awareness of what it is we intend to do, especially if there's some kind of distraction. And you're going to hear that we can lose this awareness in a moment. When I set out to pick up the dry cleaning on the way home, I don't have to think about that drive home. But if I lose focus or get distracted on a story on the radio or something, I might drive right by that road. Because my habit memory has basically taken over. And you can hear from people that are going to be able to explain this. Leaving Chick-fil-A and driving straight through that intersection is Ross's pattern. It's his habit. And on June the 18th, he intended to depart from that habit and that pattern. He got every reason in the world to take him to daycare. That was his plan. That's what he intended to do. And you can see this area that we're talking about. I mean, this is right off the interstate. These are ramps to the interstate. This is a very high traffic, very serious intersection. Look how wide all these lanes are. Just let me show you real briefly so you'll understand. It's going to make more sense. This one. when he leaves Chick-fil-A, he's got to come out here and he's got to take a right on Cumberland Parkway. But he's got to immediately, and this is up here is where the interstate is, so we got cars coming off the interstate in the morning. He's got to get over in this left-hand lane. Why? Because he's immediately got to get in this little jump lane here, this turn lane, to do a U-turn. Right here. So what he's got to do is he's got to be watching out for cars coming up here, coming up Paces Ferry. But more importantly, this is a Home Depot store back here. When he's making this U-turn, he's got to watch cars coming here. Trucks that are loading up in the morning that are pouring back onto the road. Right there. And you've got to pay attention. You got to really pay attention there. And it's something that he does every day. But he's got to pay attention, very close attention every day right there. Habit memory takes over. He goes straight through that intersection at Paces Ferry all the time. It's his habit. It's his pattern. That's what you're going to hear. That's what you're going to see. And I can't make this clear enough. Ross never forgot that he had a son. If you don't remember anything that I said this morning, please write it down. Somebody remember that. He never forgot that he had a son. That wasn't the issue. He's just lost awareness that he's in the car. He's gotten distracted somewhere along the way, and his habit memory's kicked in, and he's gone straight through that intersection to work. You're going to hear that sometimes there are cues that can remind us what it is we're supposed to do. The main one being seeing the child or hearing the child as a reminder. Oh, crap, I got to take a left at this intersection, take him to daycare. The kind of cue that reminds you of exactly what you intended to do, but it slipped your mind. And you're going to hear that Ross is deaf in his left ear. Excuse me, his right ear. He's deaf. But here, you're going to see and you're going to hear that this drive was so short. It was so short. It was just minutes. There wasn't enough time for anything to re-engage his memory that Cooper was in the car. If he had driven another 5 miles, chances are pretty good he'd have had to look back over his shoulder and seen him. But the drive was so short, there wasn't time for that cue that we normally get. Oh yeah, I got to do this. And by the time he pulls into the treehouse, his work day, it started. It's already started. He's forgotten. He steps out of that car, it's a new day. Why didn't he remember during the day? Because there was nothing to specifically challenge his memory that he had forgotten Cooper. Nothing. You heard yesterday that Mr. Boring said there were all kind of things to remind him. He got a text from Leanna asking if he got to work. He had an email from a travel agent about a vacation. He was texting a stranger about his son. He had a Chick-fil-A cup. He had emails from Little Aprons. By the way, that email from Little Aprons, it didn't say anything about Cooper. And it certainly didn't say anything about, hey, Cooper's not here today. It's just the regular email that came every day from the daycare. There was nothing remarkable or unique about it. He doesn't need a cue to remind him he has a son. He already knows that. He needed a cue to remind him, I forgot to take him to daycare. And you're going to see on his desk, he's got a picture of Cooper. He's got a little paper tie that Cooper had made him at daycare. Had to look at it all day long. He didn't forget he had a son. He knew he had a son. That wasn't a cue. That wasn't a cue that he had forgotten him. There's a big distinction there. Nothing challenged his mind that, hey, oh my God, he's not in daycare. They didn't call. There wasn't anything that triggered, oh my God, I forgot to take him. Brian, cut it off. There's one person in this world who has got every reason in the world to hate that guy, to despise that guy. Because that guy over there, Ross Harris, he took everything from her. He cheated on her. He humiliated her in front of the whole world. He's responsible for the death of her only little boy. She ought to hate him. She ought to despise the heck out of him. And nobody would blame her. But you're going to hear from Ross's wife. If they don't call her, we're going to call her. And she's going to sit right here. And she's going to tell you, he was unfaithful to me. He didn't do me right in our marriage. He didn't do me right. And you know what? He didn't take care of my little boy. He didn't take care of my little boy on that day. He didn't do our son right either. But she's also going to sit up here in this very chair and she's going to tell you. Ross Harris loved that little boy more than anything in the world. Despite what he's done to me, what he's done to us, what he's done to Cooper, he loved that little boy more than anything. And she's going to tell you, he was a wonderful father. The woman who's got every reason in the world to despise his guts. She's going to speak the truth. She's going to tell you, they got it wrong. They got it wrong. Thank you.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a break. Step out to your jury room, have a break. Open lines, no conversation.
all rise for the jury, please.
All the notes must have been excused.
Please watch your step going down.